Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Poland on Friday to meet with Polish top officials and discuss further cooperation in the face of growing threats from Russia. Warsaw remains one of London's closest partners, stated both Starmer and Donald Tusk. More on that in a moment, but first let's look at the latest headlines. Iran and Russia have signed a strategic partnership treaty. Less attempts to cross the Polish-Belarusian border as Minsk prepares for the presidential vote. And Brussels will investigate the X platform to ensure free and fair elections in Germany. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Poland on Friday and met with both his counterpart, Donald Tusk, and the Polish president. During Tusk and Starmer's joint press conference, the Polish Prime Minister suggested that the EU Council will hold an informal summit with the UK while Poland heads the Council's presidency.
Having a so-called return after Brexit might be an illusion. I try to be realistic. However, I'd rather keep those sorts of dreams in my heart, because sometimes dreams do come true in politics. What we have to ensure is the maximal reapproachment of the UK and EU. This pertains to our cooperation in the fields of defense and security, and I'm sure there won't be any obstacles in this regard. I have also asked the Council of the EU to set up a first-of-its-kind meeting, an informal summit, to which you would be invited, Mr. Starmer. And I hope it won't turn out to be just symbolic, but a concrete meeting that helps us outline the cooperation between the EU and the UK.
Security for NATO and the EU remain crucial for Europe as Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced closer cooperation with Poland. The two nations are expected to work on a new defence and security pact. Sasha Farbach has more in his report.
Poland and the UK are long-standing allies with a partnership that goes back generations. Now the two NATO allies once again face a common threat, an aggressive Russia that seeks to destabilize all of Europe.
The key objective here will be fending off Russia's aggression. I think, some of the key focuses will be on coordinating efforts to tackle disinformation and hybrid threats, which is something that the UK and the Polish side has been doing for quite a few years now.
With the prospect of Donald Trump potentially reducing U.S. military support for Kyiv, key NATO allies have been prompted to do more on their own. The timing of the British Prime Minister's visit to Warsaw is meant to send a signal.
The UK is anxious about its position in the world, about its relationship with key allies, and it's looking to strengthen those partnerships, and thus the visits to Ukraine, the visit today to Poland.
It was former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson who was the first Western leader to travel to embattled Ukraine after the full-scale invasion by Moscow. Keir Starmer visited Kyiv on Thursday, following the tradition of UK support for Ukraine. Once again, the PM ensured that London's backing would continue, pledging security guarantees as well as a new mobile air defence system.
We agree that it must be a peace that guarantees your security, your independence, and your right to choose your own future. We will work with you and with all of our allies on steps that would be robust enough to guarantee Ukraine's security.
These declarations come at a crucial time as Russia makes gains in Ukraine, striking energy grids and cities during a harsh winter. As a major NATO player, the UK has operational capabilities to defend the eastern flank. That goes hand in hand with Poland, which has invested heavily in its modern armed forces in the last years. Together, the two nations have developed common military projects, including the Miecznik, or Swordfish, frigate, as well as advanced air defense systems. Starmer has also shored up Britain's commitment in the High North and Baltic with the Joint Expeditionary Force, a multinational partnership which includes 10 nations, as he recently toured military sites in Estonia. Even if the return of Donald Trump may result in less U.S. engagement in NATO, the UK and Poland's partnership looks to remain strong for the foreseeable future. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
Iran and Russia have signed a strategic partnership treaty. As the West watches the tightening relations between the countries with bated breath, Russian President Vladimir Putin has hailed the deal as a genuine breakthrough for the new partners. Sonia Gatabishyan has more in her report.
This symbolic visit resulted in a strategic partnership treaty. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian shared hopes of advancing construction efforts at the nation's nuclear power plant, which were met with the Russian president's approval.
The most important area of the Russian-Iranian cooperation is energy. The flagship joint project for the construction of 2 new units of the Bushehr NPP by Rosatom is moving forward.
The deal comes at a time when Putin seeks to keep up the pressure on Ukraine, while Iran's influence in the Middle East is dwindling, marked by struggles of its proxies Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The country's relationship is rooted in military cooperation. The West asserts that Russia and Iran already signed a deal for Shahed drones in 2022, following Putin's invasion of Ukraine, with the U.S. believing Tehran also supplied its short-range ballistic missiles.
Tehran so far denied supplying those drones or missiles, but third-party fact-checking has made that quite evident. Russia really relies on Iran's sort of technology and defense cooperation.
Iran, too, relies on Russia, which previously provided it with S-300 air defense missile systems. Tehran is reportedly interested in buying modernized systems as well as advanced Russian fighter jets.
That is also how Iran is using Russia. Because for Iran, it is not only a way to get access to some key military technologies, first of all, nuclear technologies, but also to make the West weaker, using Russia's war against Ukraine as a leverage against the West.
The Russia-Iran agreement is not the Kremlin's first deal of its kind. It already has strategic pacts with North Korea and China, and it is an ally of Belarus.
This agreement, as well as our agreement with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is not directed against any country and is constructive in nature and is aimed at strengthening the abilities of Russia, Iran, and our friends.
But despite Kremlin's assurances of the peaceful nature of the deal, Putin's choice of allies hardly inspires the West's confidence.
Both countries are hostile regimes, having their crucial aim in foreign policy to undermine, weaken, and ideally destroy the West. So when 2 such regimes cooperate, it's a very bad sign.
The agreement was signed just 3 days before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office.
Donald Trump has promised a maximum pressure campaign on Iran, which looks to make its regional position, its economic position, even worse.
In turn, likely prompting a swift conclusion to the Friday deal. For TVP World, Sonia Gatabishyan.
Repressions of the Kremlin know no bounds. Poland calls for the urgent release of all political prisoners in Russia. This is the reaction of Polish authorities to the sentencing of 3 lawyers who acted for the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Anastasia Yanchenko has this report.
These words came after Alexei Navalny's lawyers, who attempted to defend the late Russian dissident from the Kremlin's regime, were sentenced to 3 to 5.5 years jail time in a Russian penal colony.
What can we say? We could expect that.
Vadim Kobzev, Alexei Liptsev, and Igor Sergunin were arrested and tried for participating in an extremist organization. The lawyers were accused of illegally passing messages from Navalny, who was imprisoned in a penal colony, to his colleagues and supporters.
This is nonsense. Everything that is happening, that lawyers are being persecuted for doing their direct job. This is explained by the fact that Navalny is a toxic figure for Russia, even after his death, and all the people who helped him are now held accountable, unfortunately. This has never happened in my memory, such a mass attack on lawyers. All because they were defending Putin's #1 enemy. Very sad.
Alexei Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya, shared evidence on YouTube that Navalny and his lawyers were illegally surveilled during their private meetings.
By law, such videos shouldn't exist. Meetings between a defendant and his lawyers are protected by attorney-client privilege, and no one has the right to know their contents.
The fate of Navalny's other lawyers is also in peril. Olga Mikhailova and Alexander Fedulov, who escaped Russia, will be tried in absentia. Experts and Navalny's supporters hope that should another prisoner exchange be negotiated like the one that took place last summer, Putin may be interested in swapping the sentenced lawyers.
I think the idea of exchanging true criminals that were arrested in the West for political prisoners in Russia is extremely counterproductive. Because the thing is that Putin can take as many hostages as he likes. Putin enjoys such kind of propositions. Again, as much as I want my friends to be free.
4 years ago, Alexei Navalny returned to Russia but was detained by security forces at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport. That was Navalny's final day of freedom, as he never left the penal colony before his death a year ago.
Belarus has moved migrants from the Polish border towards Russia, says the Polish border guard. The relocation of the migrants comes ahead of the upcoming presidential election in Belarus. The regime of Alexander Lukashenko has used the migrants as a weapon aimed at the West, forcing them to storm the borders of Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
The Polish border with Belarus has been under constant attacks by aggressive illegal migrants, aided by Belarusian soldiers for the past 4 years. But now it's gone much quieter. The deputy of the Podlasie Border Guard unit has an explanation for the shift.
At some point, we observed that migrants were being taken towards Russia from the border zone. Lukashenko may be interested in peace in the country before the presidential election.
Alexander Lukashenko has been the only president of Belarus since the office was created in the 1990s. According to international observers and domestic opposition movements, Lukashenko has won each election through a rigged vote. The upcoming election is expected to be no different.
They have nothing in common with the free and fair process of people voting for some candidates, because all those who anyhow deserve the right to participate in these elections, either in jails, either in abroad, either they are keeping silence inside the country.
Democratic opposition in Belarus is brutally persecuted by the Lukashenko regime. There are more than 1,200 political prisoners in the country, according to the Vyasna Human Rights Center. Belarus, a former Soviet republic, has been under heavy influence of Russia for decades. During the launch of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a large part of Russian troops entered the country from the south of Belarus, making Minsk a party in the war. The sham presidential election will take place on January 26th.
After 5 years of construction and decades of planning, Poland has opened the doors of its new embassy in Germany on the same plot of land that Russian authorities previously used to execute orders in Berlin. It comes as both Poland and Germany strike a hopeful tone about the future. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, reports from the German capital.
A 10,000 square metre building, 475 rooms and a spot on the prestigious Unter den Linden. This, behind me, will be Poland's centre of diplomacy in Berlin. And with a heavy history between the two countries, it will also aim to strengthen the bonds with Germany, Poland's biggest trading partner. In his last term as Foreign Minister, Radosław Sikorski finally got the ball rolling on this project, and he was the one to open it. I asked him about the building's prominent location. This is what he told me.
I think it will make Poland's image in Germany of a country that is modern and successful even stronger. And yes, we are in the most prestigious location in Berlin, and the fact that we are just across the street from the Russian embassy is also symbolic.
Now, if you come along with me here, you'll see the Brandenburg Gate, just 300 metres away. In fact, Germany's Federal Office State Secretary delivered an address to the embassy's opening event, starting with the words, "Poland is back."
Poland is back. Not only in the heart of Berlin, It is back in the heart of Europe.
Finally, just across the road, as Mr. Sikorski mentioned, the Russian embassy. A reminder constantly to Polish diplomats about the war in Ukraine and the fight for peace. In Berlin for TVP World, I'm Aaron Darman.
The European Commission has extended its probe into social media platform X. Brussels is demanding information on how the company recommends various content. It comes as the Belgian executive arm announced it will participate in a roundtable in Berlin later this month with social media platforms such as X to ensure the upcoming federal election remains free and fair. TVP World's EU correspondent Angela Skidgens reports.
The European Commission has announced that it has extended its probe into social media platform X by demanding information regarding the platform's recommender systems. The deadline is set for the 13th of February and comes off the back of a larger investigation that kicked off in late 2023. And now what's interesting about this deadline is that it's roughly 1 week before Germans head to the polls for the country's federal election. In recent weeks, the social media platform X also hosted a live-streamed conversation between the company's owner, tech tycoon Elon Musk, and the leader of the far-right Alternative for Deutschland party, Alice Weidel. The conversation drew the ire from both politicians in Brussels and Berlin. And when the European Commission was asked today whether this live stream prompted this new round of investigations, here is what a spokesperson had to say.
Now, these steps are completely independent from any political considerations or indeed any specific events recently happening, but they can, of course, help us to monitor the systems around all these events taking place.
Brussels also announced today that it will head to Berlin on the 24th of January to participate in a social media roundtable. Other large social media platforms such as X have also been invited to participate. And according to the European Commission, the aim of this is to ensure that there are free and fair elections in Germany. It comes after other social media platforms such as TikTok have been embroiled in recent elections, such as the presidential contest in Romania. But so far, X have not commented on this recent news. My name is Angela Skidgens reporting from Brussels for TVP World.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer came to Poland on Friday to work on tightening ties with Warsaw in the face of common threats posed by the growing Russian imperialism and its hybrid operations targeting NATO. Starmer also paid a visit to Auschwitz German death camp and vowed to fight anti-Semitism in the UK. And to talk about the Polish-British relations and today's visit, we're joined by Przemysław Biskup from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Poland, who's holding the rotating EU presidency, is set to organise an informal UK-EU summit. Now, how do you see the role of Poland in coordinating British-European relations, cooperation in context of the continent's security and further help for Ukraine, obviously?
Well, we should probably start from the observation that Poland has a unique set of cooperation agreements with the UK, including the one signed last year on the strategic cooperation and a defense treaty from 2018. So Poland has already had extensive collaboration with Britain, especially in regards of defense and security. As an EU country, and especially during the period when Poland holds the rotating presidency, Poland is also very keen to facilitate the dialogue between the European Union and the UK concerning post-Brexit cooperation. And I expect that during the Polish presidency, and especially during that summit, the European British summit you mentioned, there will be preparatory work laid before the upcoming revision of the review, of the trade and cooperation agreement that was signed between the EU and the UK in 2020. And in the meantime, Poland will also be supporting talks on the completely new agreement concerning defense and foreign policy cooperation between the EU as a whole and Britain.
Right. Now, both gentlemen, Tusk and Starmer, put a lot of emphasis on security issues. Now, how can the two countries help each other face the growing threat of Russian imperialism?
Well, let's start from the observation that both countries are NATO flanking and, well, in case of Poland, also EU flanking countries. So we share that experience, that perspective. Britain is on the northern maritime and airspace frontier. Poland obviously is on the land frontier with Russia directly and also indirectly through Belarus, and is also a country that borders Ukraine. Poland and Britain have been cooperating very strongly on different strategic defense projects, like, for example, Poland's air and ballistic defense system, NAREW, and also the buildup of the Polish Navy, the three frigates for the Polish Navy. There is a huge potential for further cooperation in the military-industrial space, and both countries have been since 2022 the leading supporters and providers of military aid to the Ukrainian armed forces.
Mm-hmm. Well, given the fact that the UK wants to battle the illegal transfer of people, now, do you think we'll soon see combined Polish-British patrols on the Polish-Belarusian border?
Well, actually, the British presence on the Polish-Belarusian border dates back to 2021.
Mm-hmm. Right. It dates back to 2021, but the British are patrolling mostly, Polish airspace, right? So
I mean land forces.
Well, then there's a good cooperation there. All right. Poland, as the better part of Europe, awaits the first decisions of the new U.S. administration concerning Europe, concerning Ukraine. Now, is London ready to step in the American shoes to fill the gap in case of the Donald Trump's reluctance to continue the help for Ukraine?
Well, it seems to be the view in London that some kind of enhanced European coordinated effort will be necessary, but for budgetary reasons and for industrial reasons, Britain alone is not a country that will change the balance, nor is Poland, nor, I would argue, any other single European country. Mm-hmm. So basically, in terms of military industrial potential and also military spending, the US so far has been an indispensable ally.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you're mentioning defense spending, because today, during this joint press conference of Keir Starmer and Donald Tusk addressed the issue of NATO members spending on defense purposes, and the threshold is now 2% for within NATO. Donald Trump would like the member states to spend around 5% of their GDP for such purposes. And Donald Tusk also said that the UK must spend more. Now, how big a problem is this for Great Britain to pay more for defence purposes?
Well, it's a very considerable problem. I would say almost exactly the same way as any other Western European country. I would say that there is a visible cleavage between eastern flank countries who feel directly threatened, and they are expanding military expenditure on, I would say, basically unprecedented pace, starting from Finland and Baltic countries and finishing with Romania. Poland has already reached 4.2% of GDP spent on defense, and it is projected to rise in 1 year to further rise to 4.7%. Britain spends at the moment 2.3%, so it's clearly above the spending threshold, minimum spending threshold of NATO of 2% GDP for a moment, but further raising that spending to 2.5%, which would seem, I would say, to many people a not so difficult task, is proving politically extremely difficult, both for Keir Starmer and historically it has been for his predecessor, Prime Minister Sunak from the Conservative Party. I would say that Britain illustrates the general problem for Western societies, which is basically that under the conditions of relatively weak economic growth, basically considerable spending, military spending expansion would need to be at the expense of some forms of welfare or social spending. And there is no electoral and political consensus about that.
Mm-hmm. Keir Starmer also paid a visit today to the former German Nazi Auschwitz death camp and vowed to fight anti-Semitism in the UK. Now, how big a problem is it in Britain?
Well, it's a considerable problem, especially for the Labour Party, which on many occasions in last decade has been named by different human rights organizations as institutionally racist and anti-Semitic. Keir Starmer had, I would say, a fair share of that personally. We have to remember that his wife is Jewish. The problem seems to have been decreased since ousting the previous leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. But I would say that the problem is still there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Donald Tusk also emphasized today the fact that the United Kingdom and Poland want to have good relations with the US. Now, how would you characterize the current relations between the new American administration and Keir Starmer's cabinet, given Elon Musk's comments on social media?
Well, so far the cabinet is still Mr. Biden's cabinet, so I would say it's fairly good. But if you mean Mr. Trump's transition team, then basically the relationship is very strained, and there are very, very considerable ideological differences between the Labour Party and the Republican Party. On the top of that, Labour Party engaged very directly and very forcefully in supporting Mrs. Harris. So the Labour Party organized a trip of over 100 volunteers to the US to support her campaign. And Mr. Trump's team, they sued the Labour Party for basically exerting the illegal and foreign influence on American elections. There are very mixed messages concerning the new British ambassador nominated by Mr. Starmer, Lord Manderson. So we'll see. But so I would say that the beginnings can be very troubled. But at the same time, obviously, we have to remember that Britain has been traditionally in the last few decades a most important globally ally of the United States. And there is this so-called special relationship bonding both countries, and they share a lot of defense and security interests. In this last field, probably one of the first topics that will be discussed between the British government and the new Trump administration will be the future of the Chagos Islands that Mr. Starmer's government wanted to cede to the Mauritius. And in that archipelago, there is a strategically important air and naval base called Diego Garcia. So I expect this will be one of the first topics to be discussed in this respect.
Przemysław Biskup from the Polish Institute of International Affairs was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.